And we want to talk about, we're going to go through the positions. We talked about rookies in the last one. We're going to talk about quarterbacks here. And I've kind of broken it down into tiers. The rankings have changed and they go up and down depending on your preference. My first five, I don't care the order, they're the top five.
Yep.
So we'll start with Lamar Jackson, currently going in the mid-50s. Which is about a 6th round pick, depending on your league size. I really like Lamar. He has been training the house down. He adds the extra X factor with the legs. His big concern, of course, will be his wide receiver core.
There's no one big name in that receiving core.
Bateman,
obviously, Mark Andrews was the best tight end in football last year.
Had over 100 receptions, and the meme of fuck it, Andrews is down there somewhere, and Lamar tossing it up. The big thing is he's got the first rounder in Bateman. We'll see what he can kind of come into and what that fits in. And now with Hollywood out of that squad and at the Cards, and we'll get to that in a minute. But Lamar, he looked huge. If you've seen the pictures of him, he's trained the house down. I think he's really kind of coming into that kind of mold. Hopefully we'll have the running backs back, which I think they missed because they I don't want to say they're going to run the wishbone, but they do love to have that extra sweet. They love to run the football, and losing kind of those options probably limited Lamar a little bit. So let's see what that looks like this season. So I do really like Lamar. I think he's a solid pick there in that 5th or 6th round.
You're not saying he's the best quarterback in fantasy football?
He's not my number one. I'll say that. So this is just, I think of these 5, they all get picked in either that 5th or 6th round. There's one that people are picking ahead of, and I also think he's my top quarterback, but we'll get to that in a minute. Justin Herbert fits in that list as well. He's going in the early 40s, a little bit ahead of Lamar, which is a bit interesting because he's not one of those guys that adds a huge amount with his legs. But you look at the weapons. You look at the offense, the weapons. You look at what he's done. He's in a... definitely in that window there. The team has tried to elevate their play to stay with that division. It's a very tough division, but I think again I like Herbert. I think he's a solid pick in that sort of 5th round where he's going currently. The next one, Patrick Mahomes. The freak that he's a Patrick Mahomes. I probably like Herbert slightly more, purely because I think the Kansas as a team didn't do as enough in the arm race that was out the West. The other teams have got better and, got to play 6 games against those, which might make it a bit more challenging. No Hill.
Yeah, that's massive.
That's huge.
Massive. Really needs, he's going to have Kels there. We'll have to see what that looks like. Hardman's probably the one at the moment. I'm probably not relying on Juju too much there. Sky Moore has been the rookie. He's been doing really well in camp. So see how they kind of fit into that and then what that team looks like. But yeah, I just worry that the division is going to be too tough, which might limit some of his opportunities. Then on the flip side of that, it might mean he's got to throw the ball 50 times every week.
That's a good point. Also, last year, Justin Herbert had more fantasy points than Patrick Mahomes.
Yes. Yeah. So bit of a little bit of a down year for Patrick Mahomes, which is interesting to say. But we'll have to see what that looks like going forward. Kyler Murray is then the next on that list. He's going in about the 60s. And I think that's probably fair. It's a bit risky with him without Hopkins to start the year, who's facing a 6-week suspension, I believe. And I prefer the other 4 in this 5 that we're talking about. I prefer those other 3 that we've already mentioned. Of course, a lot of noise in this season with Hollywood coming across and the whole contract thing we just mentioned before. And I'm unsure about this Cards team. I feel like they've taken a step backwards. I don't think their offensive line is as good. The wide receiver group's probably a bit of a question mark until whether Brown's going to stub himself. There's no Kirk as well. And then Hopkins is going to miss the first 6 weeks. So see what they do. Cards historically start well and then have had slowed down as the season went on. And then the running back's a bit of a question mark. They've got Connor as it.
Who had a comeback year last year.
Yeah. But whether he can be a bell cow for the full year and carry that load, interesting questions. I'd still, I'd probably draft him if I could in that positions in that probably what's that, a 6th or 7th round pick in that 60s bracket. I think that's still solid value there, and see if Murray can bounce back put to bed some of these comments of recent weeks. And then the last one of my tier one, my top 5 is my top quarterback is Josh Allen.
Should he be in his own tier?
Maybe he's going in the mid 30s, and maybe that's why
which I didn't. Is early for a quarterback.
Which is early, which is probably why I didn't include him higher, because I think it is probably a touch too early. That's third or fourth round, probably fourth-ish roundish, which I think is high, because it really means because most leagues are 10 teams, even up to 15 teams. You're probably going to get a top 15 quarterback.
Yep,
let's put it that way.
Yeah, it's not the most important position traditionally in fantasy
and if you're
football.
spending a 4th round pick on a quarterback while everyone else is picking running backs or wide receivers,
you're missing out.
You're probably going to be missing out. You're probably hurting yourself there.
Having said that, is Josh Allen that much? Is he going to be that much better than everyone else?
And that's the question.
In that you're drafting a quarterback / half running back.
Yeah, and he definitely adds extra with his legs. He's got all the weapons. Hopefully Davis can probably take an extra step forward. Let's see what Cook can probably bring to that offense. He's a heavy favourite. Hopefully he's not fighting his D lineman every week like he did today in training camp. But we'll see. There are some questions there, but I think the arm talent, what they've got, they've really kind of built and set themselves up. They need to make a run. They're in that window, as I talked about. So I have him a touch ahead. I just don't like his average draft position currently. I think if you can sneak him back around, if you can get him in the 5th round, that's a good place to target him, because then potentially, you've set your roster with your 2 RBs or your 2 wide receivers.
You think he's projected at going higher than he's worth?
Yeah, and it's probably because people are going, I'm not going to get him in the 5th, so I'm going to take him at the end of the 4th as an example and get him there. So, yeah, that's probably the biggest risk, and especially when you can turn that around and, say, get Lamar 2 rounds later, maybe that's a better option.
Who you got in your second tier?
So second tier ends up being the guys that maybe don't have the legs and moving back. And I kept Hurts out. He did finish as QB6 last year, so he's not in my tier 1. I've slid him back a little bit. He's going late 60s, probably around your round 7s. They have loaded up on offense. I think they're in a kind of a prove-it year. And I just don't know if I like the Eagles team enough to like Jalen Hurts enough. Like he adds an extra amount with his legs. He's probably not as great a passer as the other 5 we just talked about.
Yeah, agree.
So that's probably why he's here. But I think they've given him the weapons with AJ Brown there. Now they have Smith in his second year. Can they take another step forward? And he's also potentially, he's probably got the best offensive line in the league too there. So he's got to take advantage of those, and maybe he can push himself into top 5 for fantasy. I'm just not a huge fan of that risk, and I like the other options better, and especially some of the options after him as well. So I'm not drafting Jalen Hurts. Interesting. On my board.
Top of the league last year for rushing touchdowns out of quarterbacks with 10. But yeah, perhaps the lack of arm talent and he threw for 16 touchdowns the whole season last year. That might be a bit concerning.
Yes. We'll see what AJ Brown does there, but that is the question. Someone that did throw a fuckload of touchdowns, Joe Burrow is next. He's going mid-70s. He's a big concern is he had absolutely nothing with the legs. Had less rushing yards than Mac Jones last year. So for statues of quarterbacks, that's his own job. But when you've got a good running back and you've got the trio of wide receivers they do, they can throw the football, and they will throw the absolute fucking shit out of it this year. So I think he's one of those really good values, and I think him, Brady, and Rodgers we'll get to, like, they're all great value for where they are. And I feel bad for some of the seniors in this list as well, considering they were probably, one was an MVP and the other one was arguably number 2 in that list. You get dropped down here. But that's because they don't add extra with their legs. So I like Joe Burrow. I like him in that probably 8-roundish range, going in the 70s there. He's got all the weapons. They've added extra on the offensive line. He should have a better season than last year, and that could be very valuable.
What about the GOAT?
Yeah, the GOAT.
45.
45.
About to turn 45.
45. Yep. He's had a slight bump in his average draft position since I did my initial notes. He's gone from like mid-80s to early 80s. Probably on the fact that they've got Julio Jones there. We mentioned him before. Added extra weapons. They've got a few weapons there. I still don't think this. I think this team's probably still not as good as its Super Bowl team. But what did he throw last year? He was over 5. He had the most passing yards.
Yeah, 5,300 passing yards.
Did he have the most touchdowns as well with 43? I think he did.
I think he had. Yeah, he had both of those.
You can't question that. I think he probably do similar as well. He's got the weapons. Mike Evans, 1,000-yard season incoming. He's not going to fall off that cliff anytime soon. They're a good football team. Going in the 9th round, like if you want to sit on quarterbacks and pick everyone else, go the Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers strategy. I think you could definitely do that because they're both going to be here around that 9th and 10th round pick.
Was also quarterback 3 last year in fantasy football.
Yeah. Stop doubting him, bro. Stop doubting him. Russell Wilson's then kind of next on this list here, going in the mid-80s.
Any personal investment here?
Yeah, let's ride.
So you're picking him, right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I've put him in here with some of the statues, but he's kind of average for rushing in the seasons between 400 and 500 yards. So he still adds a decent amount with his legs. He's not Hurts or Lamar going up there around 1,000, but he's still adding a potential there. He didn't add a lot last year.
That's my question.
But he was also hurt for a lot of that.
Sure.
But he was on pace to be QB1 before he got hurt too, with the finger injury, and then wasn't great afterwards. Plus that team, injuries to running backs, offensive line not great, and also had a preference for running the ball. Whereas he's now moved across to Denver where they've got a good trio of wide receivers. They've got a good, what were they last year? They were the best duo of running backs there. And he's got a better offensive line than he didn't see at Seattle. So, I think there's a big year coming for Russell. And I think mid-80s going in that 9th round. Again, like that's money. That's value. So I think that's excellent value there for him. And I think it's better value than, say, Prescott, who's going next, because I think he's got a little bit more questions on his weapons. Because I'm not so sure. Like, I think Dak's a good talent. He's had a great bounce back year from the injury. I think he's probably going to have another great year. I just don't know. With no Cooper, CeeDee Lamb's really the only option they've got there. Gallup, I think, is coming back off an injury. What's Zeke like? How much is Tony Pollard going to fit in there? I think they've retooled the offensive line. It's a good offensive line, top 10. So he'll have protection. Just not sure he has like the weapons that, say, Russell's going to have this season outside of CD and what that looks like. So if you've got both on the board, I'm picking Wilson and I'm not picking Dak.
I'm picking Dak Prescott there. If it's Russell versus Dak Prescott, Monks, and any thoughts? I don't think his weapons are bad. Yeah, losing Murray Cooper doesn't help. But CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, Dalton Schultz proved himself as a pretty handy tight end last year. Can still dump it off to Zeke and gives you a little bit with the legs. Yeah, he doesn't give you a Russell Wilson with the legs. But I
think they're very comparable with the legs, but they're not like those other lads we talked about in the top tier.
I've ridden Dak a couple of seasons, and he's very up and down. Like, he can have one game where he's putting 40 points on.
That's also
next
Dallas.
week's he's got like 5 points.
Yeah.
And it's just a function of Dallas being Dallas. I think it comes down to Zeke. If Zeke can get back to good Zeke, then Prescott will be awesome.
And I have big question marks in there, so I just don't see it. I just don't see it.
What about this guy?
MVP coming in. He's
2 times.
Yeah, back to back.
Three times overall.
Getting picked in the late 90s. A 10th round pick. The problem is the big questions over the receiving.
It's not so much Aaron Rodgers; it's who's around Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, question marks on the veterans.
Who's he throwing the ball?
New offensive coordinator, no Adams. He's still won the MVP. It doesn't look like he's slowing down. The Nick Cage cross play during the week, beautiful. Probably should bump his value up a little bit.
Oh no, not the beast! Yeah. Different movie, but also Nick Cage.
If you want to wait and you pick a quarterback in the 9th or 10th round, there's options there.
Just give me Aaron Rodgers in our league. Just give him to me. You can all sleep on everyone else. I'm going to go with my boy.
Yep. Yeah, I've got no questions about it. He'll put
if you want him, take him first round, guaranteed.
Yeah, there you go.
Might skip first round.
Yeah.
But they're legitimate question marks. He's lost Devontae Adams of probably the best receiver in the NFL fame.
I did look this back. Padgett picked Lamar Jackson second round last year.
Given the year before, that's probably not.
Don't pick MVPs in the second round, bro.
It's probably not the worst pick.
Better than kick.
Picking a
kicker in the second round.
But that was a meme. I'll give you a pass on that. So
doesn't give you anything with his leg, or not much with the legs.
He's in this lesser leg guys statues kind of bracket. But can sling the rock. Will be interesting who will be his prominent wide receiver, whether that's Lazard steps into that role as number one, whether the rookie gets involved, or whether they spread the ball just all over the place.
Has a mystery injury, this Christian Watson, at the moment. I'm not sure what it is, but he's not participating in training camp. All right, tier 3, who we got?
Tier 3, and then we get into Trey Lance. So unproven. Jimmy G still technically there, but they did come out during the week and said, this is Lance's team.
The guy. Yep.
Yeah, he's our number one quarterback.
Trey area.
Yeah, so whether Jimmy G gets traded, whether that ends up being like, say, the Seahawks, big questions there, but the Jimmy G era is over. Will be interesting if he stays there and plays as backup, whether they start badly, what happens, which gives me concerns with Lance. Debo is there holding in, no contract. Whether what happens there, considering every other wide receiver in his draft class has gotten paid.
Is holding in the same as holding out?
Holding out is you don't show up. Holding in is you show up but don't practice.
So I learned something today.
Yeah, him.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
It's a new thing. Yeah, I've only heard of this year. Him and DK did the same thing. As in like, hey, I'm reporting, I'm here, but I'm going to do some light stretching over here on the sideline.
Rezzy's trainer.
Yeah. So for Lance, he's everyone's QB darling. He's like, he can win your leagues. He can also potentially lose you a fuckload of leagues as well.
It's a gamble, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's essentially his rookie season. Like he played a couple of games last year, filled in, looked okay, but he's got to play all 17 games. You look at what the rookies did last year, more toted rookies as well. You probably shouldn't have been drafting any of those boys either. And I don't think any of those guys are worth drafting either in fantasy this season. But having said that, 49ers are probably better situations than any of those guys are. So they've got more talent on their roster.
You've got him as quarterback 12.
Yeah. Going in the early hundreds, which is like 11th.
Would you be willing to say if you didn't get a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes and you kind of wrote it out and you went one of the guys that we just aforementioned in tier 2, would you be willing to take
double up?
Would you double up and take a punt on Trey Lance given the potential upside?
Probably not, because there's probably more value with wide receivers and running backs.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
If I'm in a two quarterback league, yeah, I think like here's a good way to
definitely 2 quarterback league. It's a different story.
Yeah, I think this is a kind of a good spot. But yeah, if I got one quarterback, I'm probably targeting the other group we mentioned, and you should be able to get them if everyone else has drafted the others. I don't think Lance is kind of I think Lance will be the one where you don't draft him, see how he does in the first month, and then make a decision. Especially if you get Aaron Rodgers and then he blows his Achilles out week 2, you go, I'm picking up Trey Lance. I think that's kind of where he fits. I think there's more value elsewhere, and I think give him a year, prove himself, see where he is next year, and then pick him. See if he moves into that top tier that we talked about, or he's there with QB6 and Jalen Hurts. Because that's kind of what I'm thinking. Maybe
that's his upside. That's his upside.
Maybe you get Jalen Hurts, but then also maybe doesn't have the running acumen, and if he's not got the pass touchdowns, you're also worried. So, yeah, for me, I'm not drafting Trey Lance. Derek Carr, speaking of touchdowns, only 23 last year. Does get Adams, healthy Waller. Hunter Renfrow was their main wide receiver last year. What does that look like? Offensive line slightly better after they got rid of everyone and have basically retooled. Do I think mid 110s, which is like a 12th round pick? Would I wait that long on a quarterback? Probably not. unless I'm going for some big dick play, and I like Raiders, but I'm not Raiders for Super Bowl. That's not my team. So I'm probably avoiding Carr. I think he could probably get to 30 tartars this year with Adams there. I think he wins more football games than he would your fantasy games. Let's put it that way.
Yep.
He's primetime Carr. I don't think he's overtime Carr. That's what he is with the Raiders. They won plenty of games overtime. I just don't think he's fantasy relevant in this with the other names above.
I tend to agree. This next guy.
Yeah, I don't know why
people sleeping on Matt Stafford.
Yeah, and I don't know why he was ranked in the 14th here. He's going mid-90s, so he's going more where Rodgers is. Won a Super Bowl, 40 tartars last year. Does have Allen Robinson joining the squad. O-line is retooling a little bit, but otherwise...
Do you think the O-line's down on last year?
Well, they got the new left tackle, which is probably the big thing with Whitworth retiring.
Yeah,
so
40-year-old Whitworth.
Yeah.
Who looks 50 years older than Tom Brady.
Yes. So that's probably adds a little bit in there. So we'll have to see what that looks like. Sorry, the internet's just playing funny buggers there. See what happens there.
Sorry,
do you reckon the Rams
I'll close the Zach Wilson video that I was just watching.
Fuck me.
Do you reckon the Rams are as successful as last season?
They've got all the weapons there.
The defense is still there. I think that's the main
Super Bowl
thing.
hangover though.
Maybe.
Yeah, that is definitely a thing. The Super Bowl hangover. On paper,
Yeah.
who don't they have from last year? Von Miller, OBJ's hurt.
Yeah. And they've
Outside of that, everyone's back.
yeah
Yep.
traded Bobby Trees and changed
Bobby Trees,
and changed him for Allen Robinson, who's arguably probably maybe a better wide receiver. So they've got which if anything, I think Cooper Kupp probably takes a step back because they've got more options.
It'd be hard to go forward.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the problem. He can't really go forward. I think it's probably a bit back, and then Allen Robinson steps up, but that might make that team more dangerous. So I like Stafford. I like Stafford more than Carr and Lance in there, so I'd definitely take him. And then from there, just someone watching was ranked 15th in this list that I had. I don't think he's there anymore. He's going in like the 200s. But anything below here, don't draft Deshaun Watson. Don't be that guy in your team. He's got anywhere from an 8-week to a full year suspension coming in, and that probably will know the answer to that within the next week. But if you can, avoid everything after this. There's no quarterback worth looking at post this list.
Unless you're in a 2-quarterback league. And if you're doing that, you're pretty weird.
Yeah, and if you've missed out on any of these guys, you probably shut down that fantasy league and go do something else because you're in trouble.